This will be the last video in the series for the construction of the main mast. Today I'll be constructing the upper section. This is the most delicate part of the main mast, especially this radar antenna that sits at the very top of it. It is constructed out of some particularly thin and long photo etch. For example, this large shaft over here actually looks like this, and here is a finger for scale. Then, onto that incredibly thin and delicate shaft, I need to attach these two H-shaped structures, which are then somehow connected to each other with these very delicate struts. This is going to be quite a challenge. Other than that, it has a platform, which is also going to be a little bit awkward to construct because it's quite small and I need to curve this hand railing while not damaging these booms that stick out the side of it. There is also a missing component on this section of the mast. There is a boom that should sit just underneath this platform. Starting with the aerial, I'm going to construct this aerial first because it is going to be the most difficult part of the construction of this upper section of the main mast. I have been thinking quite a lot about how to construct this aerial. The problem is that there are a lot of components. They need to be glued together in very specific locations, and if they are out by even a small amount, then this thing is going to sit skew. So I've been thinking about what is the best way to put this thing together such that the components will be easy to correctly position. After looking at these drawings for a while, I decided that it would be best to start with this inner structure. I'm starting with this structure because it has a hole which gets located over this post that sticks out of the side of the mast. That means that I know that at least that part of the structure will be in the correct position. With this center position of the structure fixed, all I then need to do is fold down the top of the structure such that it touches the mast and then glue it in place. That then gives me a base from which I can then expand out. The bottom part of the inner structure does not bend and touch the mast like the upper section does. Instead, it sits a bit off the mast and is rather attached to this H-shaped structure. So, after bending the internal structure so that it's sitting in its correct position, I then install the bottom H-shaped structure and glue it to the bottom of the internal section using a little bit of thick superglue. Even though this H-shaped structure is glued to this inner structure, it is glued on its midline, and the center of the H-shaped structure itself is centered about the mast. This gives me enough play to be able to maneuver the structure to ensure that it is sitting level and in the correct orientation. While the lower H-shaped structure is still not glued to the mast, I attach the outer structure that goes between these two H-shaped structures. Like the inner structure, this outer structure is also centered about this pole that comes out of the side of the mast. So I once again use that to help locate the center of this structure and then align it with the bottom H-shaped structure. It is glued in place using extra thick superglue that was pre-applied to the legs. There is only one more component that needs to be tacked in place now, and that is the upper H-shaped structure. So I balance that in place on the mast and align it with the upper legs of this outer structure and glue it in place using extra thick superglue. At this point, these H-shaped structures are not glued to the mast. That gives me an opportunity to adjust their orientation to ensure that they are sitting straight and level, and once I'm happy with their position, I glue them to the mast using extra thin superglue. That was some pretty tricky photo etch. Glad it's done. So now let's move on to the mast itself. After removing the mast from the sprue, I cut off the top. That's the bit that's been replaced with this photo etch that I've just constructed. And then I clean up the injection points. The first thing that I'm going to add to the mast is the missing boom. From the images that I've seen, this boom should be approximately the same width as the outermost portions of the starfish platform below it. So I take that measurement off of the ship and cut a section of 0.5mm wire to length and file the edges smooth. To correctly install the boom on the mast, first I position the boom along one of the horizontal lines on the cutting mat and then ensure that it is properly centered about one of the vertical lines. While holding the boom in this position, I tape it to the cutting mat. With the boom secured in place, I know exactly where to place the mast. It just needs to run along this thick vertical line. So I apply a small drop of thick super glue to the location where the boom needs to be attached, and then place the mast on the vertical line. The next bit of photo etch can now be folded and installed. That is this platform that goes just above the boom. This is quite an awkward little bit of photo etch to fold. It needs to have this handrailing curved, but these little T-type structures that sit off the side of the platform need to remain straight. So there's really not a lot of place to work here. I have resigned myself to the fact that these T-shaped structures are going to get tapped and bent into an awkward position. So I'm just going to leave them, and instead of fiddling with them and trying to keep them straight, which is just likely to cause them to snap off, I'm just going to accept that they are wherever they are. And when I'm ready to put them in their correct position, I'll correct them at that point. So you're going to see them going off at weird angles. Don't worry about that. That's going to be corrected at the end. After doing the initial curve of the handrail using a screwdriver, I then clamp the platform with the tweezers and continue to manipulate the handrail into position using tweezers. This is going to be about as good as I'm going to get it. It is quite a difficult little bit of handrail to do. Once I have it bent in a way that I am happy enough with, I glue it in place using extra thin super glue that I apply with a wire. At this point, I'm not going to fold in these sections that wrap around towards the mast. First, I want to install the platform on the mast, and then I'll fold those in place and glue it together. If I were to fold them into place now, it would make it quite difficult for me to get this platform onto the mast. So I leave those sections folded out, and now that the handrail is mostly installed onto the platform, I just adjust it and shape it a little bit better using tweezers to get a more rounded and smoother curve. Now that I'm happy enough with the platform, I apply a small drop of thick super glue to the mast in the location where the platform should be installed, and then I place the platform on the mast. You can see now in this situation how having those back sections of handrailing open makes this a lot easier. Actually, those are the forward sections of handrailing, but anyway. Once the super glue has set and the platform is firmly attached to the mast, I then folded those forward sections of handrailing into place and glued them down using more extra thin super glue. Underneath of the platform, there are a few support struts that need to be installed. To install them, I dip the corner in extra thick super glue and then place it in contact with the underside of the platform. The support strut that runs aft is a little bit more elaborate than the other ones. It's larger and needs to be folded in half such that you get detail on both sides. Why FlyHawk decided that this component of all components needed to have detail on both sides, when there were many others that they only put detail on one side, which definitely should have had detail on both sides, is something that I will never understand. But I suppose I should just be happy that at least on this component they are giving a high level of detail. After removing and folding the support strut, it is glued in place using the same technique that I used for the other support struts. With all the support struts tacked in place, the bond is then reinforced using extra thin super glue that I apply with a wire. The next piece of photo etch to install is the ladder that runs down the front of the mast. Here I'm using the smallest type of ladder that comes with the FlyHawk kit. Cut a section of ladder that is a little bit long off the fret and then place it next to the mast to measure the correct length for it. Once cut to the correct length, I tack one end of the ladder in place using extra thick super glue and carefully position the other end. Once I'm happy with the position of the ladder at both ends, I bond it in place using extra thin super glue. This is where I make a tiny mistake. I forget to install the photo etch for the wind speed indicator, at least that's what I think it is, and instead I move straight on to installing this aerial. To install the aerial, I place a small drop of super glue at the bottom of the aerial and then place the aerial in contact with the mast. Being thick super glue, it does take a few seconds for that glue to set, so I use that time to correctly position the aerial. I want to make sure that it is standing vertical across both axes and that it isn't rotated. Still, having not remembered the wind speed indicator and thinking that all the photo etch was complete, I then readjust these T-shaped structures such that they are in the correct orientation and then reinforce their bond using extra thin super glue. Still, thinking that I've fully constructed the upper section of the mast, I spray everything with white. This is Tamiya XF2. It was during this spray painting session that I realized that I had forgotten that wind speed indicator. So I stopped painting and went on to construct it. It just consists of two components, this post, and then what I think are the actual little cups that would spin in the wind. After removing the components from their fret, I place the cups on this post and then place a small drop of thick super glue on the post. The cups have fallen a bit low, so after applying the glue, I use tweezers to lift them up into the glue. A small drop of thick super glue is applied to the base of the post, and the post is attached to the platform. Painting in white then resumes. After giving the white paint a short amount of time to dry, the whole mast is then sprayed in the gloss coat. This is Mr. Color GX112, it's UV cut super clear. This is going to help the panel line flow nicely towards the detail and make the excess easy to clean up. Once the gloss coat has fully cured, panel line can then be applied. This panel line has been quite heavily thinned. It's roughly 1 part panel line to 2 to 3 parts solvent. This is just going to make the panel line flow a little bit more easily and leave less residue to clean up. After applying the panel line, it's left to dry for around 20 minutes, and then the excess is removed using solvent. Once I'm happy with the effect from the panel line, I seal it in using Tamiya XF86, that's flat clear. The upper main mast is now ready for installation. This hole that goes to the starfish platform is just a little bit too small after all the layers of paint have been applied to the mast, so I open it up using a needle file. Once I have the hole for the mast just right, the mast easily slips into position but is still held firmly enough such that I'm able to carefully adjust the orientation of the mast. Once I'm happy that it is standing vertically and isn't rotated, I glue it in place using extra thin super glue that I apply with a wire. Once the super glue has set, I spray the area with XF86. This is going to remove the gloss effect from the super glue. And once that's done, the last thing to do is to add a little bit of highlighting using white weathering powder. With that, the main mast is now completed and installed on the ship. In the next video, I'll move on to something new. I'll begin installing some of the very many ship's boats. If you would like to support this channel or see how the ship looks when it is completed, then please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Cheers.